Welcome to Small Arms Solutions. Today we're going to be looking at a very interesting rifle, the Colt LE6940. The Colt LE6940 was very significant for a couple reasons. First of all, if you look at the lineup of Colt products over the last 20 or 30 years, in 1998, Colt introduced the LE6920. The LE6920 basically was as close as one could get to the U.S. military M4, and it'd be not selective fire and be within NFA rules. And it wouldn't really be until 2009 that the next new product would be introduced, which would be the LE6940 series. We're going to talk quite a bit about the history of it and where it came from. Actually, I was there when a lot of this went on, so I can give you sort of an insight of what was going on at Colt at the time, because it was interesting the fact that this product really began life around 2003, 2002 in that area, and it wasn't actually put into production until 2009, especially in the fact that it was shown at so many military trade shows and SHOT Shows and whatnot. It was shown, but it just wasn't released. And it really did prove to be very significant. In the end, there were some issues, but we're going to start from the beginning with it. Going back to 2002, 2003, there was the initiation of the SCAR program, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, the Special Operations Combat Assault Rifle. Colt had actually introduced 3 different models. The one-piece receiver sort of started out between some engineers at Colt and Art Daigle. Art Daigle was this model shop guy, probably one of the best in the industry. The late Mike LaPlante and also Phil Hockstrait, who was also an engineer. They had designed Colts, which you would refer to as their one-piece upper receiver. And 2 of the 3 SCAR entries would actually be based off of that. So basically what you had was a solid 7075 T6 aircraft grade forging, fairly heavy. So as this is the way it would come from the forging house, and then this would be sort of a halfway machining. Now this was a very expensive rifle to make, and it was also very time consuming in the C machines. A lot of these were made for a lot of prototypes. It really didn't go into the full production until the 2009 time period. But both the Type A and the Type C SCARs utilized this new one-piece upper receiver. And looking at this rifle we have right here, this is a very special rifle to me. This was actually one of the very first LE6940 rifles at Colt. This was a prototype. It was manufactured in the machine shop, I would say probably around 2007, 2006, maybe even a little bit earlier. This was before it had several of the refinements done to it. We're going to take a look at this from butt to muzzle, but we're going to talk a little bit more about the SCAR type rifles. The actual SCAR rifles, types A and C, would utilize this upper receiver, except as you'll see from the photograph that we're showing you, that it has a flat dark earth color to it. Interestingly enough, that flat dark earth color is not just that color. The actual entire receiver was covered in what was referred to as UCT, or Ultra Chemtech Nickel Boron. A lot of you guys will know it now as Failsafe Zero. Colt was one of the first, it was probably the first company to utilize nickel boron in the firearms industry. And that goes back to the 2002, 2003. And it was not just utilized on the bolt carrier, it was used on the entire rifle. The entire rifle was covered in the nickel boron finish, inside, outside of the receivers. You can actually see the bolt carrier on this one is standard manganese phosphate, but the original Type C or Type A SCAR, which the Type A was the direct gas, and the Type C was the external piston. So as you can see from the pictures with the golden color, it was cere coated as well, or there was some kind of an anodizing that was done to it. But underneath that was the UCT finish. That finish actually improved very good for some of the harsher environments that the Type C and Type A SCAR actually fielded during the actual testing of the SCAR program. Colt had experimented with UCT coatings on the bolt and bolt carrier, the hammer trigger mechanisms, and most of the components all had that finish on it. Well, in the end of the SCAR program, the winner ended up being the FN type SCAR rifle. In doing a lot of research on the final outcome of the SCAR program, it was very interesting. The Type C SCAR, which is the piston version, and the FN SCAR were neck and neck. And also the Type A SCAR also was very, was right there as number 3 with a direct gas system. It was pretty clear that SOCOM wanted to go with an external piston system. So there was no way that the Type A was going to get anywhere. They definitely wanted an external piston. And what it ended up being in the end was when the guys at SOCOM looked at the Type C SCAR, they were afraid that people were going to look at it as more of a updated version of what they already had, rather than a new weapon system. They looked at the SCAR FN and they basically felt there was more room to grow with it, due to the fact that it had interchangeable upper barrels, possibly different calibers. So it wasn't due to any fault of the Type C SCAR that it did not win the SCAR test or SCAR program. However, the Type C SCAR would go into the Colt archives never to be seen again, and the FN SCAR 16 would go on to have a very short life within SOCOM, and the SCAR 6 and SCAR 17 Heavy would come. However, we got some videos coming up on that. So after the SCAR program was done, the LE6940 series was underway. Basically, they took a lot of the lessons that were learned from the SCAR program. They took some of the criticisms that were done, by the guys at Crane, and made some modifications. The rifle here, this is again a very special rifle. This was a prototype. This was presented to me by General Keys, probably in the 2007 time period, for some assistance that I gave to Colt back in those days with some of their legal issues. We're going to take a look side by side, the final production and this particular model here, so you can see sort of the evolution of the program. So we're going to do some close-ups here and show you from butt to muzzle some of the changes and some of the evolution of the system. Looking at the LE6940 prototype, this upper receiver was basically the exact same one that they had used in the Type A SCAR. It was direct gas system. The lower handguard was removable for installation of the M203 grenade launcher. Looking at the front sight base, this was a front sight base that was designed around this program. The front sight was actually folding. It was a folding front sight, and if you notice, there's a detent in here, but there's no physical lock. And you can see it's just a standard gas block with bayonet lug. The barrel is actually a standard LE6920 government profile barrel. 16 inches. It's basically the exact same as the M4 carbine, with just longer. You're looking at a 14.5 inch barrel versus a 16.1. Standard muzzle brake, fully chrome plated barrel. Now the barrel nut itself was different. It does have a proprietary barrel nut, which does not require indexing, such as the standard LE6920 or standard M4 carbine. You're able to get a proper torque down here, which is generally around 60 foot-pounds is your ideal torque for a barrel nut, if you didn't have to be concerned about alignment of the gas tube. You notice you do have several vents on here for heat. You do have fully labeled for the continuous 1913 rail. Looking at the back, again, you can see, I don't like referring to this as a one-piece receiver due to the fact that the lower handguard is removable. To me, that means two. So I really struggle with actually saying the term one piece. If you look up here, you'll see there's eyelets here, and these eyelets here are for sling swivel adaptation. This was something that was put into the original one, but when it came down to the final, they decided to get rid of that and go with QD sockets as well. Of course, if you look at back at the time when the SCAR program was going on, QD sockets are not really that popular, not like they are right now. So it really didn't matter which way that you went. Looking in the back, it was provided with a U.S. government MATEC backup sight, adjustable for windage and elevation. The original semi-automatic only LE6940 came at a time when Colt was still utilizing the oversized hammer and trigger pins. This is a standard LE6920 receiver. I'm going to flip this around. As you can see, this was a standard LE6920 lower receiver. Added to this would have been the Norgon Ambi catch, which was also on the SCAR program. This was presented on it. We also have a ambidextrous selector lever. But if you notice the hammer and trigger pins, this was one of the earlier 170 diameter hammer and trigger pins, which were oversized. The current production rifles today, around the 2009-2010 time period, Colt finally got rid of the oversized parts and went to the industry standard 155 diameter hammer and trigger pins. The stock that's on here is the Valtor mod stock. This was the actual stock as well that was utilized on the types A, B, and C SCAR. This was one of the most durable stocks on the market at the time. Extremely durable. The actual Type C and Type A SCAR utilized a much heavier profile barrel than the one that's on here. It was more of a heavier barrel that was utilized for more extended firing. SOCOM required a much higher firing schedule, which required a heavier barrel. So that required an H2 buffer to prevent bolt carrier bounce on fully automatic. The LE6940 semi-automatic only stuck with the standard H. That's all that was necessary for it. But this was the actual prototype. Now we're going to start taking a look at the production LE6940. Looking on the top is again the prototype, and number two on the bottom is going to be the actual production LE6940. Now the LE6940 has been offered in several variations. You would have a 10.3 inch barrel, a 14.5 inch barrel, a 16 inch barrel. You would also have it in semi-automatic only. You would have it in safe semi-automatic. You'd have it in safe semi-burst. It could be had in any different variation, whether it was utilized for military or law enforcement applications or commercial. Some of the major differences really were very small. As you can see from the comparing the upper receivers, you can see the eyelet here, as well as you can see the QD detachment points here. This is actually on both sides. Now we're going to take a look actually at the front sights. Due to some of the complaints, from customers, military customers, and so forth, Colt actually placed a lock on the front sight base because they found that if it was to get struck, it could knock it down. So they went with a lock instead. This was carried over to all of their LE6940, the piston guns, as well as the LE901. Looking inside the receiver, you will see that they're the cam pin slot itself. And now we looked over at the current production, you'll see there's a piece of metal that actually sits right behind the cam slot. This was actually added specifically for the LE6940P, which is the actual external piston operated, or the Colt piston carbine. This was actually designed in 1968 by Winchester. During 1968, they were having issues with the M16 rifle with the malfunctioning, and the Army had asked for Colt and for Winchester to come up with ways that they could turn this gun into a external piston gun like an AK. Colt went to work on their Model 703, and Winchester went to work on an actual conversion. Basically, they removed the gas tube, they put another gas block in there, and it was a short stroke tappet piston. Well, they had found that due to the violent opening recoil on the short stroke tappet piston, that the cam pin was actually cutting into the aluminum. So what they did was they actually took a metal screw and located it right behind the rear edge of the cam pin, and what that did was that prevented the cam pin from actually going back any further to damaging the receiver itself. Well, Colt took a look at that as well, and they basically refined it, and they put an actual piece of metal in there rather than just a screw. Now, you don't really see this damage on direct gas guns. You generally only see this on external pistons. So at first, Colt was just using it on their piston guns, and then they eventually turned over to all their receivers. When you look at the opposite side, you can actually see where the screw is that holds in the guard behind the cam pin. Now, originally these were just done for the external piston guns, and eventually Colt converted it over to all of the one-piece upper receivers. Whether it be a 5.56 or even the LE69 or LE901 308s, those utilize this as well. So that was one of the upgrades they did as well. The stocks were changed from the mod stock. Initial ones came out with the regular Colt mil spec stock, and then they were changed over to the Rogers mod stock. If you also look at the lower receivers, the lower receiver of the new rifle is no longer a Colt law enforcement carbine receiver. It actually is marked on an M4. And also they went back to the standard 155 diameter hammer and trigger pins to make it accept all the industry standard components. Those were the actual major improvements of the rifle. So now we're going to go back in time a little bit. The LE6940 really was an ideal rifle. If you were considering buying, say, an LE6920, one of the first things you're going to do is you're going to go out and you're going to buy another handguard to put on it. Then you're going to want to have a flat top upper receiver, so you're going to want to get rid of your sights and put on backup sights. The LE6940 sort of gives you all that with one rifle. The one-piece upper receiver gives you a complete free-floated barrel. The accuracy on these rifles was extremely well. This particular rifle I have here is a sub-MOA rifle with 77 grain Black Hills Mark 262 ammunition. You also have the folding sights, which when you mount your optics on there, you don't have the optics getting in the way of your your iron sights getting in the way of your optics. Current production rifles actually come with a Magpul backup sight. This is the polymer one. Now the gun pretty much in its final configuration was available around the 2009-2010 time period. Again, they were shown at all the trade shows, military trade shows, SHOT Show, but they were not available to the customers. In 2009, I was working in the sales and marketing area at Colt, and at the time we were working with Laser Max on the CGL, or was a laser aiming vertical pistol grip that went on the front. And there was a discussion about how to release, and I had mentioned to my boss at the time that I felt this was the time to introduce both. It's going to be a significant event for Colt to introduce their first new product since 1998 and the rifle line. Colt was very much in production of the M4 carbines at the time, so there wasn't a lot of production capacity available, but there was a lot of buzz around it. And I proposed how I wanted to do it to my boss, and he goes, okay, we're going to go talk to the general. So we sat in the boardroom. It was me, my boss, and General Keyes. And I explained that I felt this was an ideal time to release in 2009 both products together. I gave him a plan of how I wanted to get the marketing done for as far as getting these guns out to authors to get the buzz on it. We had shown them for quite some time, and the customers wanted it. It was significant, and General Keyes gave his blessing. So I hand selected 5 or 6 authors that I thought were some of the best in the industry. We got these guns out to them, and the evaluations came out incredible. The gun started trickling out. Again, it wasn't really mass production because, again, we were in the middle of the global war on terrorism. We were producing 3 shifts of M4 carbines. The rifle would go on to be very, very much in demand. One of the major issues that came up with the production was there was not enough to go around. We always had heard that. The receiver also was the host to the LE6940P, or the advanced piston carbine, which you would use the exact same upper receiver. You just change the gas block, and it would insert the piston mechanism instead. Those were, again, only offered really as, for the most part, they were shown. Colt was not forthright on wanting to release their external piston gun, as we discussed in a previous video. The external piston gun was available at the time of the Type C SCAR, which was 2004, 2005, in that area in there. They had shown the LE1020 prototypes probably from 2006, in that area in there, 2007. They were shown, but they were not available. It really wasn't until 2000, I believe it was around 2011 or 2012, where Colt actually released the LE6940P. And to my understanding now, it is no longer in production. It's only in production for military customers. So the LE6940P, or piston gun, is pretty much a unicorn. So the LE6940 was a very much a success. However, there did come some legal issues with it, which is sort of given, I don't want to say its demise, but a very much lack of being able to see them right now. There was actually a patent infringement issue with the upper receiver with the Carl Lewis's MRP. Now, being that Colt at the time and knowing people who were involved, I by no means believe that it was done maliciously. I know the gentleman who actually designed this upper receiver, how they did it. I've seen the prototypes. I think really what it came down to was when it came down to the lawyers actually checking on the prior art and whatnot, that wasn't done. So Colt has to actually pay a royalty to LMT for all these receivers. One-piece upper receivers, whether it be the LE6940 or whether the LE901. So rumor has it, again, I can't verify or deny it, that the LE6940 or any of these one-piece upper receivers are pretty much going out of production due to the patent infringement. Obviously, Colt doesn't want to pay royalties to somebody else. They're looking to go back to the two-piece, with the actual upper receiver and a separate handguard, which in some ways that's actually a good idea because they're saving money. The guns will not be nearly as expensive to make, so the customers will actually have more options at a better cost. But the LE6940 really was very significant in Colt's history of the black rifle, being that it was very different from the M4. It was very different from the LE6920. It found a lot of favor in law enforcement, even some military contracts. People had bought it in various configurations. They were always around on the expensive side, usually around $1,600. But we're not going to shoot these. This is no different than shooting an LE6940 or any other M4 type rifle. But there's a very interesting story behind this, which I wanted to share with you. This was definitely again, a next generation type Colt rifle for as far as Colt was concerned, actually doing something different than the standard M4. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please click like and please subscribe. Thank you.